Marcus Chen, a 45-year-old billionaire CEO, lives isolated in his corporate world until a charity event at a school in Chicago forces him to confront a past he thought he had left behind. When he sees the smile of a 16-year-old girl named Emma during the choir performance, something stirs a painful memory, the same smile as Sarah, the girl he loved and lost 17 years ago. Determined to uncover the connection, Marcus embarks on an emotional journey that will reveal family secrets, second chances, and the true meaning of responsibility, forever changing both his life and Emma's. Before we begin, tell us, what city or country are you watching this story from? It's always incredible to know how far these narratives reach. The auditorium of Lincoln High School buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that only school fundraising events could generate. Marcus Chen adjusted his Armani suit jacket, feeling completely out of place among the folding chairs and hand-painted banners reading, "Support our music program." At 45, he'd built Chen Technologies into a billion-dollar empire, but sitting here surrounded by teenagers and their parents felt more intimidating than any boardroom negotiation. "Mr. Chen, thank you so much for coming." Principal Rodriguez approached with the practiced smile of someone who'd spent years courting donors. "Your company's contribution will make such a difference for these kids." Marcus nodded politely, his mind already calculating how quickly he could make his obligatory appearance and leave. The call from his assistant had been clear: show up, write a check, get the good publicity. Simple. "The students have prepared a special performance," Principal Rodriguez continued, gesturing toward the stage where teenagers in black choir robes were filing into position. "Our music program has been struggling with budget cuts, but these kids, they have real talent." The lights dimmed, and Marcus found himself trapped in the front row as the choir director, a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back severely, raised her hands. The first notes of Hallelujah filled the small auditorium, and Marcus felt his shoulders relax slightly. At least the music was decent, but then she stepped forward for her solo. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, with dark hair that caught the stage lights and skin that spoke of mixed heritage, perhaps Hispanic and something else. She was pretty in that fresh, unguarded way that only teenagers possessed, but it wasn't her appearance that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was her smile. As she began to sing, her face lit up with pure joy, and Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. That smile, the way her left dimple appeared deeper than her right, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way her whole face seemed to glow from within. It was identical to another smile he'd known 17 years ago, Sarah's smile. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly, his knuckles went white. Sarah Martinez, the girl he'd loved with the desperate intensity that only 18-year-olds could manage. Sarah, who'd disappeared from his life one summer day with nothing but a note saying she was sorry, that her family was moving, that he needed to forget about her and focus on his future. Sarah, who'd been pregnant. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The timing, the resemblance, the way this girl's features seemed to echo memories he'd tried so hard to bury. It couldn't be coincidence. "Beautiful voice, isn't it?" Principal Rodriguez whispered beside him. "Emma Vasquez. She's one of our scholarship students. Incredibly bright, but her family's going through some tough times. Her mother works 2 jobs just to keep them afloat." Emma. The name didn't match, but that smile. Marcus watched as the girl, Emma, poured her heart into the song, completely lost in the music. She had Sarah's passion, that same fearless way of throwing herself into something she loved. When the performance ended and the applause filled the room, Marcus remained frozen in his seat while everyone else stood. Emma's eyes swept the audience, accepting their appreciation with that radiant smile, and for a moment, just a moment, her gaze met his. The world stopped. In that instant, Marcus saw not just Sarah's smile, but something else. Something in the shape of her eyes, the set of her jaw, that looked hauntingly familiar in a different way, like looking in a mirror, but 17 years younger. "Mr. Chen?" Principal Rodriguez's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maybe he had. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Marcus wrote his check, a much larger one than he'd originally intended, and made the expected small talk, all while his mind raced. He found himself studying Emma from across the room as she laughed with her friends, helped fold chairs, hugged her choir director goodbye. Every gesture, every expression only reinforced his growing certainty. This wasn't just resemblance, this was recognition. As parents and students filtered out of the auditorium, Marcus lingered, pretending to review the program notes while actually watching Emma pack up her music folder. She moved with Sarah's same unconscious grace, the same way of tucking her hair behind her ear when she concentrated. "Emma," a woman's voice called from the doorway, heavily accented. "Vámonos, mija. I have to work early tomorrow." Marcus looked up sharply as a tired-looking Latina woman in hospital scrubs entered the auditorium. She was probably in her early 40s, worn down by years of hard work, but there was something about her profile. "Coming, Mom," Emma called back, and the woman turned. Marcus's world exploded. It was Sarah. Older, tired, with lines around her eyes and silver threading through her dark hair, but unmistakably Sarah Martinez. The girl he'd loved, the girl who'd broken his heart, the girl who'd disappeared carrying what was very clearly his daughter. Their eyes met across the crowded auditorium, and Sarah's face went white as parchment. Her hand flew to her throat in a gesture Marcus remembered from their teenage years, something she did when she was scared or overwhelmed. "No," she whispered, and even from 20 feet away, Marcus could read her lips. "No, no, no." Emma, oblivious to the drama unfolding, bounded over to her mother with typical teenage energy. "Mom, you should have heard the applause, mister. Patterson thinks I might actually have a shot at that conservatory scholarship we talked about." Sarah's eyes never left Marcus's face as she put her arm around Emma's shoulders. That's wonderful, baby, but we need to go now." "But Mom, I wanted to thank the sponsors." "Now, Emma." The sharpness in Sarah's voice made Emma look up in surprise and then follow her mother's gaze across the room. Marcus realized he was staring, probably looking like a man who'd just been struck by lightning. "Who's that guy?" Emma asked, and Marcus caught the words despite the distance. "Nobody," Sarah said quickly, already steering her daughter toward the exit. "Just nobody important." But as they reached the doorway, Emma glanced back over her shoulder, and once again her eyes met Marcus's. This time he saw curiosity in her gaze, and something else, a spark of recognition that she couldn't quite place. Then they were gone, leaving Marcus standing alone in the emptying auditorium, with the weight of 17 years' worth of questions crushing down on him. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed his assistant. "Jennifer, I need you to find everything you can about a student at Lincoln High School, Emma Vasquez, and her mother, Sarah. Sarah Vasquez now, apparently. I need addresses, employment records, everything." "Sir, is this about the charity event?" "Just do it, Jennifer. Tonight." As he walked to his car through the Chicago evening, Marcus's mind reeled with possibilities and implications. Emma was his daughter. He was as certain of that as he'd ever been of anything in his life, which meant that for 16 years, he'd had a child he'd never known about, a daughter who'd grown up without him, struggling while he'd built his empire. But more than that, it meant Sarah had lied to him. She'd disappeared not because her family was moving, but because she was pregnant and had decided to raise their child alone. She'd let him believe she was gone forever, while she was probably right here in Chicago, working 2 jobs to support the daughter he'd never even known existed. The anger that rose in his chest was matched only by an overwhelming sense of loss. 16 years of birthdays, school plays, first days of school, bedtime stories, all gone. And that smile, that beautiful smile that was so much like her mother's, had been brightening someone else's world while he'd convinced himself he was better off alone. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow he would get answers. Tonight he would plan how to reclaim the family he'd never known he'd lost. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the city lights blur through floor-to-ceiling windows as Jennifer's research painted a picture that made his chest tight with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Sarah Martinez, now Sarah Vasquez after a brief marriage that had ended in divorce when Emma was 7, worked as a night shift cleaner at Northwestern Memorial Hospital and weekend shifts at a local diner. Emma was indeed 16, born exactly 9 months after Sarah had disappeared from his life. Honor Roll student, scholarship recipient, part of the school's academic decathlon team. They lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Pilsen, barely scraping by despite Sarah's 70-hour work weeks. His daughter, and he was certain now that Emma was his daughter, had grown up poor while he'd accumulated billions. The anger that had simmered all night reached a boiling point as Marcus pulled up outside Northwestern Memorial at 6 a.m., knowing Sarah's shift would be ending soon. He sat in his Tesla, watching hospital employees stream out of the building, until he spotted her familiar figure walking toward the bus stop. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped, her scrubs wrinkled from a long night of work. This wasn't the vibrant 18-year-old he'd known, but a woman worn down by years of struggle. Marcus got out of his car and called across the parking lot. Sarah. She froze mid-step, her back still turned to him. For a moment he thought she might run. Then slowly she turned around, and in the harsh morning light, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the lines that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too much worry. Marcus? Her voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want? 17 years of truth would be a good start. Sarah glanced around nervously, noting the other hospital workers walking past, some already staring at the expensive car and the man in the tailored coat. Not here, please. Then where? Because we're having this conversation, Sarah. Today. She closed her eyes, looking like a woman who'd just received a death sentence. There's a diner on Ashland. Carmen's. I'll be there in an hour. I'll drive you. No. The word came out sharp and fast. I'll take the bus. 1 hour. Marcus wanted to argue, but something in her posture told him that pushing now would only make her bolt. He nodded curtly and watched as she walked away, her back straight with the kind of dignity that came from years of surviving on your own terms. Taistas and the Carmen's Diner was exactly the kind of place Marcus hadn't set foot in for decades. Worn vinyl booths, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill, and coffee that could strip paint. Sarah was already there when he arrived, hunched over a cup in the back corner booth, still in her hospital scrubs. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment he saw the girl he'd fallen in love with at 17. Vulnerable, beautiful, scared. You look good, Marcus, she said quietly as he slid into the booth across from her. Success suits you. Don't. His voice was harder than he'd intended. Don't pretend this is some casual reunion. Emma is my daughter. Sarah's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. How do you... Her smile. She has your smile, Sarah, but she has my eyes, my jawline, and she's exactly the right age. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. So don't you dare sit there and lie to me again. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, but her voice remained steady. Yes, she's yours. The confirmation hit him like a physical blow, even though he'd known. Hearing it out loud made it real in a way that 17 years of wondering never had. Why? The single word contained decades of hurt. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Because you had Columbia waiting for you. You had your whole future planned out. Business school, your father's company, all of it. I wasn't going to trap you with a baby. That wasn't your choice to make. Marcus's voice rose, drawing stares from other patrons. He forced himself to lower it. That was our baby, our choice. You were 18, Marcus, we both were. You think you would have been happy giving up everything for a teenage pregnancy. You think you wouldn't have resented me, resented her, when you were stuck in some dead-end job because you never got to go to college. So instead, you decided to disappear and let me think you didn't care about me. Let me spend 17 years wondering what I did wrong? Sarah's composure finally cracked. You think it was easy? You think leaving you was easy? I loved you, Marcus. God help me. I loved you so much it nearly killed me to walk away. But I was pregnant and terrified, and my parents were threatening to disown me, and you were this bright, brilliant boy with his whole life ahead of him, and I... She broke off, sobbing quietly into her hands. Marcus felt his anger wavering in the face of her pain, but he pushed it down. So you took my choice away. You took my daughter away. I gave her a good life, Sarah said fiercely, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Maybe not a rich life, but a good one. She's smart, Marcus. Smarter than both of us. She's kind and funny and talented, and she works hard for everything she gets. I made sure of that, while working yourself to death to pay for it. Marcus gestured at her exhausted appearance. 2 jobs, Sarah? Really? When you knew I could have what? Swooped in and saved us? Played the hero? Sarah's voice turned bitter. You think I didn't consider it? You think there weren't nights when I was holding a sick baby and wondering if I'd made the worst mistake of my life? But by then, you were already at Columbia, already becoming the man you were meant to be. What was I supposed to do? Show up at your dorm room with a baby and destroy everything you'd worked for? You were supposed to trust me enough to let me make that decision myself. The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Sarah stared down at her coffee, and Marcus studied her face, trying to reconcile this tired, worn-down woman with the girl who'd been his first love, his first everything. Does she know? He asked finally. About me? Sarah shook her head. She thinks her father was a boy I dated in high school who died in a car accident. I couldn't bear to tell her that her father just wasn't interested in being a father. But I was interested. Marcus slammed his palm on the table, making Sarah jump. I am interested. She's my daughter, Sarah. Mine. And you've kept her from me for 16 years. What do you want me to do, Marcus? Go home and tell her that her father is actually a billionaire who never knew she existed. You think that won't mess her up? You think she'll just accept you with open arms after a lifetime of believing you were dead? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the diner window at the Chicago street beyond. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer but no less determined. I want to know her. I want to be part of her life. I've missed 16 years, Sarah. I won't miss any more. And if she doesn't want that? If knowing the truth hurts her more than the lie ever did? Marcus met Sarah's eyes across the table. Then that's her choice to make. But it is her choice, Sarah. Not yours. Never yours again. The weight of 16 years of secrets and regrets settled between them like a third presence in the booth. Outside, Chicago rushed by in its usual chaos, but inside Carmen's diner, two people who'd once loved each other more than life itself sat staring at the ruins of what might have been. I need time, Sarah whispered finally, to figure out how to tell her, to prepare her. How much time? I don't know, a few days, a week? Marcus pulled out his business card and slid it across the table. You have until Sunday. If you haven't told her by then, I will. Sarah picked up the card with trembling fingers. Marcus, please. Sunday, Sarah. He stood up, leaving money on the table for coffee he hadn't touched. Don't make me wait any longer to meet my daughter. Emma Vasquez had always prided herself on reading people. It was a skill she'd developed out of necessity. When your mum worked multiple jobs and you spent a lot of time alone, you learned to pick up on the subtle signs that told you when adults were lying, worried, or hiding something important. Right now, her mom was doing all three. It had started the morning after the school fundraiser. Sarah had been quiet during breakfast, picking at her toast while staring at nothing. When Emma asked if she was okay, Sarah had startled like she'd been caught stealing. Just tired, mija. Long shift last night. But Emma knew her mother's tired, and this wasn't it. This was something else entirely. By Thursday, Sarah was a nervous wreck. She'd called in sick to the diner, something she never did, and spent the day pacing their small apartment like a caged animal. When Emma came home from school, she found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with old photo albums spread out in front of her. Mom? Emma dropped her backpack by the door, studying her mother's face. What's going on? Sarah quickly closed the album she'd been looking at, but not before Emma caught a glimpse of old pictures. Her mother as a teenager, laughing with friends Emma had never heard about. Nothing, baby. Just feeling nostalgic. Emma sat down across from her, her dark eyes so much like Marcus Chen's, though she didn't know it, studying her mother's face with the intensity that had made her teachers recommend her for advanced classes. Mom, you've been weird all week, ever since the fundraiser. Did something happen there? The color drained from Sarah's face. No, nothing happened. Why would you ask that? Because you're lying. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. You get this little crease between your eyebrows when you lie, and you've had it since Tuesday morning. Sarah laughed shakily. You're too smart for your own good, you know that? It's a family trait, apparently. Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Mum, whatever it is, you can tell me. We're a team, remember? It's been us against the world for as long as I can remember. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Us against the world. If only Emma knew that it hadn't always been just them, that there was someone out there who could have made their world so much easier, so much better. Emma, Sarah started, then stopped. How do you tell your daughter that everything she believes about her father is a lie? How do you explain that the dead hero she'd created was actually very much alive and had been asking about her for the past 3 days? Marcus had been calling, not demanding, not threatening, just persistent, leaving voicemails asking about Emma's favorite subjects in school, whether she was interested in business, if she had any health issues he should know about. Each message made it clearer that he wasn't going away, and each one made Sarah's carefully constructed world feel more fragile. Mom, Emma's voice brought her back to the present. You're scaring me. I'm sorry, baby, Sarah squeezed Emma's hand. There's something I need to tell you, something about your father. Emma went very still. They rarely talked about her father. The topic was too painful for her mother, and Emma had learned years ago not to push. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered about him. What he'd been like, whether he'd wanted children, if he would have been proud of her academic achievements. What about him? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't ready. Despite Marcus's ultimatum, despite knowing she was running out of time, She wasn't ready to blow up her daughter's world. He would have been proud of you, of your performance the other night. Emma's face softened. Really, he loved music too. It wasn't exactly a lie, Sarah told herself. Marcus had loved music. She remembered him playing guitar, singing along to the radio in his beat-up Honda Civic. But it wasn't the truth Emma deserved either. By Friday evening, Sarah was barely holding it together. She'd made it through her hospital shift on autopilot, her mind consumed by the impossible choice ahead of her. Tell Emma and watch her daughter's world implode, or refuse Marcus and risk him showing up at their door with lawyers and demands and the kind of power that could destroy their quiet life. She was so lost in thought as she walked to the bus stop that she almost didn't notice the familiar figure waiting by her usual bench. Marcus stood as she approached, and Sarah felt her heart skip the same way it had when she was 18. He looked tired too, she realized. The past few days had aged him, carved new lines around his eyes. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "I told you Sunday. I hired a private investigator." The words stopped Sarah cold. "What?" "I needed to know more about Emma, about her life, her interests, her friends." Marcus's voice was calm, but Sarah could hear the underlying steel. "Do you know she's been accepted to 3 different college preparatory programs for next summer? Full scholarships to all of them. Because her grades are so exceptional that MIT is already recruiting her." Sarah stared at him. "How did you—" "MIT, Sarah. The guidance counselor thinks she has a real shot at getting in early admission, but she turned down all 3 summer programs. Because we can't afford the travel costs," Sarah whispered. "Or the time off work for me to—" "She could have everything." Marcus stepped closer, his voice intense. "The best schools, the best opportunities, everything she's brilliant enough to deserve. And instead, she's turning down chances because you're too proud to let me help. You think this is about pride?" Sarah's exhaustion finally boiled over into anger. "You think I like watching my daughter work twice as hard for half the opportunities? You think I don't know exactly what I'm depriving her of? Then why?" "Because she's happy." Sarah's voice cracked. "She's happy and secure, and she knows who she is. She doesn't need to find out that her father is some billionaire stranger who could buy and sell her whole world without blinking. She doesn't need to deal with the media attention and the questions and the people who will suddenly want to be her friend because of your money. She deserves better than this," Marcus said quietly, gesturing at the bus stop, at Sarah's worn scrubs, at the reality of their hand-to-mouth existence. "She deserves a choice," Sarah countered, "and she deserves to hear it from me, not from some private investigator's report." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 16 years and an impossible decision hanging between them. "I'm going to tell her," Sarah said finally, "this weekend. But Marcus, when I do, when her world falls apart, you better be ready to pick up the pieces. Because if you hurt her, if you disappoint her the way you—" She stopped herself. "The way I what?" Sarah looked at him with eyes full of old pain. "The way you would have if I'd told you 17 years ago and watched you choose your future over us." The accusation hung in the air like a physical blow. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, to defend himself, but something in Sarah's expression stopped him. Maybe it was the certainty there, the absolute conviction that she knew him better than he knew himself. "Sunday," Sarah said again, turning toward the approaching bus. "I'll tell her Sunday." As the bus pulled away, Marcus watched through the tinted windows as Sarah slumped in her seat, looking every inch the exhausted single mother she was. And for the first time since this all began, he wondered if she might have been right all those years ago. What if he wouldn't have been ready? What if 18-year-old Marcus Chen, with his carefully mapped future and his father's expectations weighing on his shoulders, would have chosen Columbia over responsibility? The thought terrified him more than any corporate takeover ever had. Of that night, Emma found her mother crying at the kitchen table, the photo albums open again to pictures of a life Emma had never known about. "Mom!" Emma knelt beside Sarah's chair, her heart breaking at the sight of her strong mother looking so fragile. "Please, whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. We always do." Sarah pulled Emma into a fierce hug, memorizing the feeling of her daughter's trust, her absolute faith that whatever came next, they'd face it as a team. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, Sarah held her daughter close and prayed that love would be enough to survive the truth. Sunday morning dawned grey and overcast, matching Sarah's mood as she made Emma's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes that they could barely afford, but that always made her daughter smile. Today, Sarah needed all the smiles she could get. Emma padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, her dark hair messy from sleep, looking so young that Sarah's heart nearly broke all over again. "Pancakes on a Sunday?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion? Did you win the lottery and forget to tell me?" If only it were that simple, Sarah thought. Can't a mum make her daughter pancakes without a special reason? But Emma was already studying her face with that unsettling perceptiveness that reminded Sarah so much of Marcus. "Mum, you've been acting strange all week, and now comfort food for breakfast? Just tell me, are we getting evicted? Did you lose one of your jobs? Because whatever it is, we'll figure it out." Sarah set the plate in front of Emma and sat down across from her, her hands shaking slightly. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you. Something about your father." Emma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. In 16 years, Sarah had volunteered information about Emma's father exactly 3 times, and each conversation had been brief and painful. "What about him? He's not dead." The words fell into the silence between them like stones into still water. Emma set down her fork slowly, her face going very pale. "What do you mean, he's not dead?" Sarah closed her eyes, gathering courage. "I lied to you, Mija. Your father didn't die in a car accident. He's alive, and he's here in Chicago." "Here?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "How long have you known?" "Since Tuesday night. Since the school fundraiser." Emma stared at her mother as the pieces clicked into place. "That man, the one in the expensive suit who kept staring at us, that was him, wasn't it?" Sarah nodded miserably. "His name is Marcus Chen. He's successful, very successful, and he wants to meet you." "Marcus Chen?" Emma's face scrunched in concentration. "Why does that name sound familiar?" "He's the CEO of Chen Technologies. He was one of the sponsors for your music program." Emma's mouth fell open. "The billionaire? Mom, are you telling me my father is Marcus Chen? The Marcus Chen?" "Emma, listen to me." But Emma was already on her feet, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. "My father is one of the richest men in Chicago, and we've been living like this. Mom, do you know how many nights I've watched you fall asleep at the kitchen table because you were too tired to make it to bed? How many times I've seen you count change just to buy groceries?" "Emma, please. All this time, all these years of struggling, and he was right here." Emma's voice was rising, raw with hurt and confusion. "Why? Why would you keep this from me?" Sarah stood up, reaching for her daughter, but Emma stepped back. "Because I was 18 and scared, and I thought I was protecting both of you." "Protecting us? From what? From having enough money for you to see a doctor when you're sick? From me not having to turn down college programs because we can't afford them?" Tears were streaming down Emma's face now. "From having a father who didn't want you." The words exploded out of Sarah before she could stop them, and Emma recoiled as if she'd been slapped. "He didn't want me." Sarah's own tears started then. "I don't know, baby. I don't know what he would have wanted because I never gave him the chance to choose. He was 18, Emma. We both were. He had his whole future planned out, and I was so afraid that if I told him about you, he'd either hate me for trapping him, or he'd give up everything and hate me for that instead." Emma sank back into her chair, looking smaller and younger than her 16 years. "So you made the choice for him?" "Yes. And for me?" "Yes." They sat in silence for a long moment, the chocolate chip pancakes growing cold between them. Does he want to meet me now?" Emma asked finally, her voice small. "Yes, very much." "And what do you want?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "I want whatever makes you happy, Mija. I want whatever's best for you, even if it means I lose you to the life I kept you from." Emma looked up sharply. "Lose me? Mom, you're not going to lose me. You're my mom. You raised me. You sacrificed everything for me. You made me who I am. Some rich stranger showing up doesn't change that." Relief flooded through Sarah, but Emma wasn't finished. "But I need to meet him. I need to know who he is, what he's like, whether he's a good person or just someone with a lot of money and a guilty conscience." Sarah nodded. "I'll call him." "No." Emma's voice was stronger now, more decisive. "I'll call him. This is my choice now, right? Not yours, not his, mine." Thou start here season 2 hours later. Emma stood in front of the towering glass building that housed Chen Technologies, her mother beside her for moral support. She'd insisted on coming here, to his territory, rather than meeting somewhere neutral. She wanted to see him in his element, to understand the world she'd been kept from. The executive floor was intimidating, all marble and glass and the kind of quiet efficiency that spoke of serious money. But Emma walked through it with her chin up, her mother's stubborn pride evident in every step. Marcus was waiting in his office, and when Emma walked in, she stopped short. Seeing him in person, in full light, the resemblance was unmistakable. She had his eyes, his jawline, even the way he stood with his hands clasped behind his back when he was nervous. "Hello, Emma?" His voice was careful, controlled. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Chen." Emma's voice was equally formal. "I have some questions." "I'm sure you do. Please sit." Emma remained standing, studying him with the same intensity that had unnerved Sarah all week. "First question, if my mother had told you about me 17 years ago, what would you have done?" The directness of it caught Marcus off guard. He'd expected anger, tears, maybe even demands. He hadn't expected to be interrogated. I'd like to think I would have done the right thing." "That's not an answer." Marcus looked at this fierce, intelligent girl, his daughter, and realized she wasn't going to accept platitudes or careful corporate speak. She wanted the truth, even if it hurt. "I don't know," he said finally. "I was 18, Emma. I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was arrogant and ambitious and completely unprepared for real responsibility. I might have stepped up or I might have run. Your mother probably knew me better than I knew myself." Emma nodded slowly. "Second question, what do you want from me now?" "I want to know you. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. I want to make up for 16 years of birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories that I missed." And third question, "What do you want from my mother?" Marcus glanced at Sarah, who was watching this exchange with a mixture of pride and terror. "I want her to forgive me for the things I said this week. I want her to know that I understand why she made the choices she did, even if I don't agree with them." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "I'm not going to call you Dad. I don't know you well enough for that, and I don't know if I ever will. I understand? But I would like to know you. Maybe we could start slowly? Coffee sometimes? You could tell me about your work. I could tell you about school." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. "I'd like that very much. And my mom comes too. To everything. I'm not choosing between you. I'm adding you to what we already have, not replacing it." "Of course." Emma finally sat down, looking between her parents, because that's what they were now, whether traditional or not. "This is going to be weird, isn't it?" Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had all week. "Probably." Marcus smiled, the first real smile Emma had seen from him. "Definitely." "Good," Emma said, surprising them both. "I like weird. Weird keeps things interesting. And now that you've made it to the end, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your presence matters, and your story does too." 6 months later, Emma would perform at her high school graduation as valedictorian, with both her parents in the audience. Marcus would cry when she dedicated her speech to the mother who sacrificed everything to give me the world, and the father who's working every day to earn his place in it. Sarah would finally go back to school herself, her tuition paid for by a father determined to give his daughter's mother the opportunities she'd given up for their child. And Marcus would learn that the most important acquisition of his career wasn't a company or a contract. It was the trust of a 16-year-old girl who taught him that love isn't about the time you've had, but what you do with the time you have left. Sometimes the best families aren't born. They're built, one honest conversation at a time.